Good morning and welcome to the Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm John Coffey, a community minister with our congregation, and it's my joy to welcome you this morning. We have a hymn that we like to sing in Unitarian Universalist congregations, and it goes like this. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Those are the words of the poet Rumi, and what often gets left out are the words that are in the original text of that poem. Though you've broken your vow 1,000 times, come, yet again come. The message here is that no matter how many times you've messed up or you think you've messed up, we can return again to our community, we can return again to ourselves. And in that spirit of returning again, we welcome you this morning. No matter where you are, no matter where life finds you, welcome to the Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church. Come, let us worship together.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our great covenant.
With joy we claim the growing light, advancing thought and widening view, the larger freedom, clearer sight, which from the old unfold the new. With wider view, the loftier goal, with fuller light, more good to see. With freedom, rulers of control, with knowledge deeper, reverence speed.
Good morning. I have a question for you. I wonder if any of you like to tell jokes or silly stories. Maybe a story that you've heard from somebody else, or even a story about something that happened in your family that you still just think is so funny that you like to tell it over and over and over again. I think humorous stories are often told many times over and maybe even passed down again and again to other people. And so I'm going to talk with you this morning about some stories that have been passed down, some silly, humorous stories about a character who is a Sufi folk character named Nasruddin. And in fact, stories about Nasruddin have been told in many cultures and many places, including in Afghanistan and Iran, parts of Western China, and in Turkey. And Nasruddin is the kind of character who's sort of sometimes referred to as a wise fool. Let me see if you can think about why. I'll share an example. So it's said that one time Nasruddin decided that he wanted to learn how to swim. He had never learned, and he was very fearful about falling in the water and what would happen if he did. And so he really wanted to be able to swim. And so what he did is what many of us would do. He contacted a local person who taught people how to swim, a local swimming instructor, and arranged to meet him at a nearby river to learn. And so the teacher was going to teach him how to swim. So the time came when they arrived together at the river, and Nasruddin began to think that maybe this hadn't been such a good idea after all, because he looked at the water in the river and it looked pretty scary to him. He wasn't so sure, and you know what he did? He turned around and he started to run away back towards his home. And the teacher called out and he said, "Nasruddin, where are you going? Didn't you want me to teach you how to swim? That's not the way to do it." And Nasruddin called over his shoulder as he ran, "It is far too dangerous to go in the water without knowing how to swim. I will learn first." So he ran home. He got out a book about learning how to swim, and he read it and read it and read it, and then he practiced on his bed. First one arm, then the other. First one leg, and you kick. He was very sure that it was not the right idea to go in the water at all until he knew how to swim. Now that's kind of a silly story, right? Do you think it's possible to learn how to swim without ever going in the water? One of the fun things about these stories is not just that they are kind of silly and that he maybe appears to be kind of foolish, but they can point us towards something that is a little bit unexpected. They are wisdom stories, not just funny stories, because they call into question sometimes assumptions we make about what we know or our perspective and the way we look at things. Another example is a time when a neighbor came to visit Nasruddin because Nasruddin had a donkey and the neighbor wanted to borrow it. Now, unfortunately, Nasruddin didn't like this neighbor very much. They really didn't get along, and he didn't feel like giving his donkey to the neighbor to borrow. And so he made up a story. He said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Ordinarily, I would be happy to lend you my donkey, but you see, my donkey's not here today. I've already lent him to my brother, and he's taken them way out of town. He needed some work, and that the donkey could help with. And so he's not here. I'm sorry." And the neighbor said, "Oh, well, thank you anyway," and turned to leave. But then something happened. The donkey, who was in the backyard, let out a loud bray. Now, what do donkeys sound like? Can anybody make a donkey noise? Hee-haw, right? Something like that. Well, the neighbor heard this and turned around and said, I thought you said your donkey wasn't here." And Nasruddin looked at his neighbor and said, "My friend, who are you going to believe? Me or a donkey?" Another kind of silly story. Yeah. But I wonder, who do you believe? How do you know what you know? Are you going to listen to your own senses, your own ideas? Are you sometimes so very sure you know what you're talking about that you're not open to other perspectives? Now, sometimes, of course, you really do know. Was that donkey there? Yeah, it was really there. There's one final story I'm going to share with you that's told about Nasruddin, and this is about Nasruddin, who was at a game with a friend of his that he was watching, some kind of sport, and they had been cheering and watching, and as happens sometimes when you are cheering a lot and yelling a lot, he began to be very thirsty. And so Nasruddin turned to his friend and said, "Oh, I'm going to go get a drink of water." And his friend said, "And one for me, please." A few minutes later, Nasruddin returned. Nothing in his hands. And his friend asked him, "Well, where is my water?" And Nasruddin said to him, "Well, after I had my drink of water, you were no longer thirsty." Sometimes we know what we know. Sometimes we don't know quite as much as what we know, and sometimes what we know is clouded by our own perspectives and our own ideas. Nasruddin's stories have been told for so many years because they turn things upside down sometimes, and they make us see in different ways, and there are many, many, many Nasruddin stories. These are just a few examples. But we want to lift up today the value of seeing things from other perspectives and of questioning the things we think we know already, and to recognize that maybe we don't know quite as much as sometimes we think we do. Thank you.
Good morning. There are two readings today, both unison readings that can be found hopefully on the screen or in the email that was sent earlier. 4, 5, 8. Mindful of truth, ever exceeding our knowledge, and community, ever exceeding our practice. Reverently, we covenant together, beginning with ourselves as we are, to share the strength of our integrity and the heritage of our spirit, and in the unending quest for wisdom and love. By Walter Royal Jones, Jr. The second reading is 496, and again, can be found in the hymnal, or hopefully it has been shared with you. 496. From arrogance, pompousness, and from thinking ourselves more important than we are, may some saving sense of human and humor liberate us. For allowing ourselves to ridicule the faith of others, may we be forgiven. From making war and calling it peace, special privilege and calling it justice, indifference and calling it intolerance, pollution and calling it progress, may we be cured. For telling ourselves and others that evil is inevitable while good is impossible, may we stand corrected. God of our mixed up, tragic, aspiring, doubtful, and insurgent lives, help us to be good as in our hearts we have always wanted to be. Amen.
Becoming human. Once a man came to me and spoke for hours about his great visions of God he felt he was having. He asked me for confirmation, saying, "Are these wondrous dreams true?" I replied, "How many goats do you have?" He looked surprised and said, "I am speaking of sublime visions, and you ask about goats?" And I spoke again, saying, Yes, brother. How many do you have? Well, Hafiz, I have 62. And how many wives? Again, he looked surprised, then said, 4. How many rose bushes in your garden? How many children? Are your parents still alive? Do you feed the birds in winter? And to all he answered. Then I said, you asked me if I thought your visions were true. I would say that they were if they make you become more human, more kind to every creature and plant that you know. Becoming Human by Hafiz.
Good morning, my name is Claudia Presley, and I'm the Director of Administration here at TVUUC. This morning, our Share the Plate offering will be split between TVUUC and the Interfaith Health Clinic. You'll be seeing a video after this about the Interfaith Health Clinic, but let me just say this morning that we welcome you here. We welcome you to a place that hopefully you feel like you belong. When you belong, you're able to relax, you're able to exhale, you're able to feel at home. And we hope that that's what you feel when you walk in the doors at TVUUC. We hope that that's what you feel when you watch our video. We hope that that's what you feel when you connect with us through any of the online classes that we're doing right now. So if you feel like TVUUC is a place for you to come in, be yourself, be able to exhale, and be at home, we would invite you to give to help support that. The way you can do that is go to tvuuc.org/give. Or you can text give by going to the number 73256, type in TVUUC and the amount that you would like to give. Once again, thanks for being with us this morning. We hope to see you soon.
Interfaith Health Clinic is located in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we have been changing and saving lives in this region since 1991. We provide primary medical, general dentistry, counseling services, and pharmaceutical assistance to the low-income, working, uninsured. Over 90% of our patients make minimum wage. In our 28 years, we have served over 24,000 individuals who needed it the most.
Now, with everything going on with the coronavirus, the fact that Interfaith is still open and taking care of patients like me means so much. Their doctors and nurses are still at work every day and 2 nights a week, taking care of sick patients and making sure all their other patients have medicine and information that they need to stay healthy.
It's a wonderful place for people that are uninsured or underinsured. Interfaith is the place to come.
My age, it means less. The country I come from is called the Midwest. I was taught and brought up there, the laws to abide, and that the land that I lived in has God on its side. Oh, the history books tell it, they tell it so well. The cavalry's charged and the Indians fell. The cavalry's charged and the Indians died. Oh, the country was young with God on its side. The Spanish-American War had its day, and the Civil War too was soon laid away. I was made to memorize, with guns in their hands and God on their side. The First World War, boys, it came and it went. The reason for fighting I never did get, but I learned to accept it with pride. But you don't count the dead when God's on your side. The Second World War, boys, it came to an end. We forgave the Germans, and then we were friends. Though they murdered 6 million in the ovens they fried, the Germans now too have God on their side. I've learned to hate the Russians all through my whole life. If another war comes, it's them we must fight. To hate them and fear them, to run and to hide, and accept it all bravely with God on my side. But now we have weapons of chemical dust. If fight them we're forced to, then fight them we must. One push of a button and a shot the world wide. And you never ask questions when God's on your side. For many a dark hour I've been thinking about this, that Jesus Christ was betrayed by a kiss. But I can't think for you, you have to decide whether Judas Iscariot had God on his side. So now as I'm leaving, I'm weary as hell. The confusion I'm feeling, ain't no tongue can tell. The words fill my head and fall to the floor. If God's on our side, He'll stop the next war.
Since this is the season of Ramadan, it seems especially appropriate to tell a Sufi story, which comes from the Islamic tradition. And Sufi stories are often funny stories, and they're often told about a trickster character known as Nasruddin, who is sort of a wise fool. And the story goes that one day there was an emperor who called Nasruddin before his throne and said to him, "I need a title, an official title, that will let people know that God is on my side. I've noticed that other emperors have titles like God ordained, or God sanctified, or God favored. Can you think of a title like that for me?" And Nasruddin said, "God forbid." The story reminds us that the word God should be used carefully, cautiously, and sparingly. I was reminded of that fact many years ago when I took a group from our church to go visit the mosque in Fort Sanders, And we stayed for the prayers, and afterwards we met with their youth group, and our kids could ask their kids questions. And one of our kids asked this question. They said, I've noticed that Muslims speak about God as He. Do you see God as male? And one of the people to answer from the mosque was a young woman, and she said, yes, we often use the word He. But one of the things my father told me is that whatever we imagine God to be, God is the opposite. And once we've imagined the opposite, then we need to know God is the opposite of that. In other words, God is bigger than our ideas, bigger than our concepts, bigger than our imagination. There's a story that's told about a child who's in Sunday school, a young girl, and she's drawing a picture. And the teacher comes up to her and says, what are you drawing a picture of? And she says, I am drawing a picture of God. And the teacher is sort of taken aback. She says, but no one knows what God looks like. And the little girl says, they will know once I'm done with my picture. We can admire that young girl's confidence even as we recognize it as overconfidence. As Rabbi Abraham Heschel once said, any statement we can make about God is an understatement. And so it is with our pictures and our images and our ideas. When our children draw pictures, when they're young and they draw pictures of us, as parents, we love them and we admire them and we place them on our refrigerators, but we rarely recognize ourselves. And so it is with images of the divine. The Apostle Paul said, when I was a child, I spoke like a child, I reasoned like a child, but when I became an adult, I put childish things behind me. And so it is with our images and pictures of divinity. There may be one symbol, however, that proves helpful for us this morning, and that is the symbol of Islam, the crescent and the star. I recently heard an imam say that one of the significant things about this symbol is it reminds us that all we have at any given time is a thin sliver of light, a thin slice of knowledge about divinity and the universe and everything. And the fact that we only have a thin sliver of light should keep us humble. And if we think about what a moon is not the source of the light. It is merely a reflection of the light. So what we have is merely a thin slice of a reflection of the light. And this should indeed be a source of humility. When President Abraham Lincoln was serving in the midst of the Civil War, he noted that both the North and the South claimed that God was on their side. And he said both sides cannot be right, and it's possible that neither side was right. And in fact, that what both sides needed was a lot more humility. I am reminded of the words of the prophet Micah, who wondered what it meant to be truly religious. Is it about doing the right rituals and the right ceremonies? And he concluded that it didn't involve doing the right burnt offerings or holy sacrifices. He said, what does the Lord require of you but to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God? This last part, walking humbly, might be the most difficult spiritual practice of all. My friend, the Reverend John Butler of the Clinton Chapel AME Church in Mechanicsville, likes to say that whenever someone comes up to him and says, I think God has called me to the ministry, he says, have you checked caller ID? That's because sometimes it isn't God calling us to the ministry, it's our own arrogance. I know it was arrogance that got me into the ministry, and here was the arrogant thought that did it. One day, when I was a young man, I thought, maybe, I'm not sure, but possibly, maybe, I might make a good minister. Talk about breathtaking arrogance. Anyone who's been into the ministry knows that it's bigger than any one person. It's even bigger than one church. It can stretch you to the breaking point. I tell young people studying for the ministry that arrogance can get you into the job, but it can't save you once you get in there. It can get you in, but it's not much help once you're in there. And we're in a time of shared ministry because of the pandemic. We have a shared ministry of healing in the world. And this should be a cause for humility for us all, because we realize that everyday decisions we make are life and death decisions, not only for ourselves, but for others. As our leaders are opening up the economy, we have more choices. And now we have to reflect and say, what decisions am I going to make? And whether we wash our hands or not, that's a life or death decision. Or whether we wear face masks, that's a life or death decision. Or keeping social distance, whether we decide to open up a business or open up a church. These are life and death decisions that should be grounded in humility. In our church, we are still closed, and we are going to make that decision based on the best health information that we can get. We're not going to be guided by politics. We're going to be guided by health information, and we'll be paying attention to that and keeping safe guidelines, knowing that we only have a small part of the knowledge. There's a lot that's unknown about how this pandemic is going to unfold. During Ramadan, it's meant to be a time of humility, and fasting is practiced during Ramadan, going without food when the sun rises until the sun sets. And this is not so much an act of personal piety or to show personal devotion or personal morality, as so much it is an act of social justice. It's meant to make us feel more compassionate for the poor, because when we do without, we realize what it's like to do without. And we are in a time of huge unemployment, and there's a great deal of need out there in the world, and our church is committed to help meet that need through our interfaith partners working for good health and food. But there is reason for humility, and this tradition of fasting is what's meant to awaken the conscience. There's another story that's told about Nasruddin. Nasruddin is at a sporting event with a friend, and he says to his friend, "I'm going to go get me a drink of water." And his friend says, "Will you bring me back a drink?" And so Nasruddin goes off to the concession stand, and he comes back without anything at all. And his friend's upset. He says, "Why didn't you bring me back something to drink?" And Nasruddin says, "Well, I found out that after I had my drink, you were no longer thirsty." And this is the way human beings are. When we are no longer thirsty and when we are full, often we forget to be compassionate toward other people. As Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "I am never more conservative than after dinner." Once we've had a good meal, it's easy to forget about the needs of other people. And so during the season of Ramadan, this is a time for us all to practice humility. We are all given life and death decisions in our hands. As the Hebrew scriptures say, "I set before you life and death, a blessing and a curse. Therefore choose life." We are challenged to choose life in this time. We are challenged to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly, mindful that we only have a sliver of the light, only a small amount of knowledge to go by. But as the Quaker mystic Carolyn Fox once said, "Live up to the light thou hast, and more shall be granted thee." And that's what we can do. We can live up to the light we have. We can do the best that we can. We can't do anything more, but neither can we do anything less. For if we were to do anything less, well, God forbid.
My best
Whether staying at home or going out into the world to provide essential services, the world awaits our liberating and healing mystery. Let us act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly, living up to the light we have in the hopes that more will be granted to us.
Though physical distance may separate us, we can be connected to one another in deep and meaningful ways. So, as our last act of worship, I invite you to find those ways of reaching out to those in our community and dial, click, call, ring, whatever it is, but turn and greet your neighbor in that spirit. Blessed be.